I see. Okay, thank you very much. So first of all, I would like to meet. I've been working for marine geology, science, and after that moved to Paris, bring the science, and at present working for General Secretary, the Prime Minister, Prime Minister, wait, till marine in charge, advise about. So today, they asked me to write about your title was right how there is transformative science, especially and the ocean, which for and I would like to learn how the European Marine Board will explain what is the European is engaged process for the sustainable goals. So probably so all of you know goals. There is one which is stated, and I will say that more than that, 60% of all goals who are linked to food and the 7th part. So it goes very well with because we need partners to reach goals. Unfortunately, but your goal in work. So let's go to the talk. What is at stake? All know all that. We have a very increase in the carbon, and in the especially carbon dioxide, and that linked to a real increase in the there is we bring the temperature more expected, and at present we have very long La Nina period, which normally in the top a little bit problem. What we have also together is proportion. So there is different scenarios, even with the pandemic, and even maybe with the war. I don't know where we are going. If we have atomic bombs, I think the population will decrease in a different, not increase, it's than expected. That's not a good scenario in any case. I prefer to see the world population increasing and decreasing because of atomic bombs. Anyway, let's go to the ocean. And I will say that the ocean is the heart of our planet. It's covers 71% of the ocean of the Earth's surface. You know that. You retain a vast amount of heat. 93% of the excess of energy from human activity is taken by the oceans, and 1/3 of the carbon dioxide, which is produced by human fossil activities, is also uptake by the oceans. And if we take ocean, land, snow and ice, together with the atmosphere, this is the climate system. It's formed the climate systems. And that's the reason we need to better know, especially the oceans, for most of that reason. How do we do that? There's, in fact, facts and knowledge gaps, a lot of knowledge gaps. So there is only, we say, about 5% of the ocean floor which has been really mapped. Yeah, there is a program called Seabed 2030, where they claim that they are mapping they have mapped already 20% of the ocean floor, and in 2030 they will have mapped 80%. But the grid is it's around 1 kilometer. So if you compare to what we do on Earth with satellite, 1 kilometer grid, it's not enough. You don't see exactly what you have on the seafloor. It's better than nothing, but it's not as good as we believe. We had only 3 men. Now we have 4 humans who have explored the deepest point until 2020, and recently 3 Chinese in 2020 dove also in the Mariana Trench and reached 11 kilometers of water depth. And compared to that, we have in the 70s, 12 men have been on the moon, and in the 70s, only 3 men. 2 men has reached the 11 kilometers depth. In fact, we have at the United Nations 2 World Ocean Assessment report, and they have noticed that the ocean has been seriously degraded, and that's a big problem. And if we don't address this problem, we will go to deprive the society of many of the benefits that the ocean could bring to the humankind and to us. And that's really a problem. And in 2012, 10 years ago already, Ban Ki-moon, the General Secretary of the United Nations, has said these words, I just read them, is maintaining and restoring our natural infrastructure can provide economic gains worth trillions of dollars each year. Allowing it to decline is like throwing money out of the window. And it's like the climate. We have been calling for many years about the climate change, and it's only when there is big problems, that big storms, flood, and the insurance company have to pay a lot, that the society and the politicians take consideration about the climate change. And it will be exactly the same about the oceans. So how they came to the United Nations to these decades? In fact, they wanted to have research and development needs, have a transformation in the science, and needs this transformative science for ocean research. They wanted to map the oceans. I was talking about the problem of mapping the oceans previously. Comprehensive ocean using observing systems. We lack of the observation. We need the observation, especially if we want to model. I will come back to that. We want a quantitative understanding of ocean ecosystem and their function to manage and adapt. We need data and information system. We need to include ocean in an integrated multi-hazard warning system. You see with the storms, you see with the tsunamis, you see with all the problems that could bring big waves and so bring by the ocean. So we need to have warning systems for the populations. I'm not going to recall what happened in 2004 in Indonesia and Sri Lanka, or in 2011 with the big earthquake which happened in Japan with the big tsunami, who has a lot of consequences and a lot of casualties. Ocean in the Earth observation system, which is also important. We need research for that, a transformative research to reach the prediction, and a capacity building, which is also important. So the university has to play a big role in this capacity building. We need more scientists and more people interested in the ocean and work with the ocean, with a transfer of technology, training, education, and ocean literacy. That's what they proposed by the UN decade. So for that, they have made an implementation plan. It's a resummary with 7 outcomes. So clean ocean, an healthy and resilient ocean, a productive ocean, a safe ocean, an accessible ocean. That was the 6 initial goals. And after that, they say we have to inspire the new generation. We have to engage the population and the citizens in that, and they bring these 7 outcomes. And for that, they come to 10 challenges. I'm not to read them. You have all the 10 challenges, and I will come back to some of them after in the presentation. What the role, so I was talking about the European Marine Board, and what is the Marine Board? It is European Marine Board, and how we are working. Our philosophy is to try to bridge this gap which exists between science and policy. And that's something I'm trying to do also in my job now, to make the politician and the stakeholder understand the role of the ocean, especially for the climate, for the interest of the population and the human being. I feel the impression in 2015 during the COP21 in Paris. They were going to talk about the climate, very important, the climate change and so on. And the former Prime Minister, Laurent Fabius, was in charge of organizing this COP21. When we talk to him and we say, what are you, do we have a presentation about the ocean and so on? He say, what is the role of the ocean on the climate? So you see, the politicians, they have a lot of work to understand. In 2015, most of the politicians didn't know the role of the ocean on the climate, which is primordial, as we say in French. So what we do at the European Marine Board, we try, it's not we are doing, we try to bridge that gap and to fill it, and we try to bring high quality advice. And I think this is important when we have all the representatives of European university here, because they have a role to play. So we are a unique European partnership, and we are constituted of major marine and oceanographic institutions, also research funding agency and national network of universities. The University of Bretagne Occidentale is member of that during this partnership. And we have a secretariat. You see the faces of the secretariat. So I'm a little bit egocentric, so I put my picture in first. So sorry about that. So we have 35 members and from 18 countries. So we are well represented all around Europe. What we are doing, we are trying to transfer knowledge to the core of marine research policy. In providing advice, for that you will see we have position paper, we have vision documents, statements, we organize meetings. In impacting, we try to impact the European research area, and especially we try to impact and bring the understanding in the framework program of Europe with our position paper. So we try to also ask the research investments to go more for oceans and see how we can manage the oceans. And for that, we target, of course, primarily the European Commission, the Parliament of Europe, and also national policymakers and program managers. We want to engage the science community and the general public. So we are absolutely in line with the decades, and we produce every 4 or 5 years a position paper, which is a summary of the big orientations, a sort of a foresight for what the science should be in the next decades. So the last one was published in 2020. In general, we do that 1 year before the framework program, try to orientate the framework program. The last one, so we will prepare, we are on the way to prepare the Navigating the Future 6. This one is 5. It's not Navigating the Future. V is 5 in Roman language. So we have 5 key scientific questions: 4-dimensional ocean, which is 3D, and time, impact of multiple and cumulative human stressors, how to predict extreme events, I told that already, natural hazard and climate, advance in ocean technology, modeling and artificial intelligence, which is something which is a little bit fashion. I have always a trouble to talk about artificial intelligence because I don't know how we define artificial intelligence when we don't know what is really the real intelligence. So it's a little bit to say what is artificial. So I prefer machine learning or deep learning, which is not normally what the machine is doing. It's not at that time of being an intelligence thing. I think I will be dead when we will have this intelligence artificial. Anyway, that's a personal point of view. Sorry about that. And we try to foster sustainability science. It's a little bit the talk about today and what we've been asked. So what we have done, we have tried to also participate to this implementation plan of the decade. And for that, we bring our recommendation of the Navigating the Future, and we make some recommendations. So about our 5 points, we try to reach and see how they link with the 6 outcomes, and the 7, which is inspiring and engaging the people, is exactly what we are doing. So it's all together for that. So here is some example of the recommendation we did for the ocean decades. So they wanted to have a clean ocean, and for that we have produced some recommendations how to evaluate the cumulative effects of pollutants, especially and including plastics, which is something that the citizen and the young generation can see. It's very visible on the beach and on the sea. But there's a lot of other pollutants that the people are not seeing, which also are very important and for the degradation of the ocean. We have a safe ocean. So I say that already we have to study the meteo tsunamis, but also the marine hazards, and including the influence of climate change and biodiversity impacts, which is also important. What do we have? So also our recommendations, how do we go to an healthy ocean? We need an interdisciplinary program on ocean connectivity, and especially using 4D structure and function. How to go to a transparent ocean? We develop a virtual reality ocean platform where data is available and processed in real time. Also, how we go for sustainably harvested ocean. So, you know, we are here in an area where fisheries and aquaculture is important. Especially, I think I recommend you to try the oyster here. I'm coming from Paris, so the first thing I did at lunchtime is to eat some mussels because it's a very good place. So crabs and oyster, I recommend you before they disappear. So we have to integrate assessment, resilience strategy, trade-off and ethical concept into decision support framework. Predicted ocean. So I talk about the mapping, but we have to feed data into interdisciplinary models. The models is something we are talking about, which is important. I will come back to that for early warning systems and multiple stressor, dipping points, and extreme events. So modeling, I was taking, so we have a position paper, which is called Enhancing Europe's Capability Marine Ecosystem Modeling for Societal Benefits. And we have been concluding, I just give you the conclusion of that, there is no single model that can answer all the questions, but we need several models to assemble and reach the full end-to-end spectrum. So that was one publication was being produced in 2018, and they are still available if you need to have them on the internet of the European Marine Board. I give the link there. Modeling, we have been talking about, I talked about the artificial intelligence, but I was a little bit joking because this is a term we use. And now we go to what we call these digital twins, and the digital twins of the oceans. What for? We want to test, have simulator test and predictions. I don't know, you are probably not from France and the region. There were a big storm in Corsica a couple of weeks ago. And unfortunately, the models didn't predict the huge amount of storm. Why? Because in fact, there is no measurement about the heating of the Mediterranean Sea, who has increased too rapidly during the summer, and they were not aware that some of heat cells leaving from the oceans will bring this big difference between the atmosphere and the oceans and bring these big storms. So you see, we need more data to feed before doing the model. If you have, you know all that, if you do a model with lack of data, you can predict anything which are not really real. So what we need is climate scenarios. We need to know what's going to happen to us, and supporting, this is a word, the sustainable blue economy, especially fishing and aquaculture. And what we have to do now is adapt more than stop. We have to stop, but we need to adapt, because the hysteresis effect of the climate change is on its way. And even if we stop anything, we will have an increase in temperature in any case. So this is a program of the Ocean Decades, which is called DITO, Digital Twin of the Oceans, and it's led by a German institute, GEOMAR, with others like the UK National Ocean Center, Oceanographic Center. Big data and AI, intelligence artificials. We have produced also big data in marine science, which is a future science brief. And for that, we did a forum where we talk about the data in marine science. And the reason was we need the data for climate and marine biodiversity and biogeochemistry. We need to collect more biogeochemistry data. We need this data to see how we can achieve the marine conservation. And we need marine biological observation, especially for food provision, which I've talked already about that. And that answer one of the objectives of the decade, which is ocean digital representation. So to that, for the modeling, we have this type of recommendations all among the reports we have produced. We need to identify an available data. Sorry about my French accent, some words are difficult. So link to new data, strengthen links to our simulation centers. There is a European program which is called EMONNet, which is a network of database, which is something very important and works for me very well. We have to increase the model predictability through coordinated model experiments and ensemble approach, develop shared knowledge platform, more transparency, especially about uncertainties and limitations, and promote co-design and dialogue between models and users. This is also an important point. Enhance transdisciplinary connection and training opportunities and include socio-economic driver. And I think we will hear about this science and human science, which is important to take into account that we have has a scientific forgot during a long period of time, and I think now it's coming on the spot. A European perspective of ocean observation. This is something also important, to have an ocean observing system, and we have produced a policy brief for sustaining in situ ocean observation. This is also under discussion at the United Nations. There was an informal process conference in June in New York, and we are supporting at the European Marine Board, EOS, to have a European integrating observing systems. We will integrate the observation from land, from shore to the deep sea, and taking into account physical measurement, but also biological and chemistry measurement, which is for us something very important. So for the observation, we came to that we have a vision. We want that it's a public good global information infrastructure. We need a public infrastructure. We need a consistent methodology to quantify value and cost, which is important. We need a mandate for this observing system. What that means? We need a binding national commitment. We don't need to have this short-term project in funding. This is also very important. National and international funding is needed. That's something important. We need to also leverage the private sector infrastructures, financial or other instruments. We have to overcome marginal cost barriers. We need to bring the industry, and we need to bring the people who can finance such important things of observing the ocean. We know, of course, the word which also fashion words, co-design, co-benefits, multi-stakeholders, blended fundings, research and development of multiple users for ocean observing infrastructure. So I'm not going to read the two recommendations. I'll let you read the recommendation. So a holistic observing system, it's important. And we have to sustain an infrastructure. We will deliver the ocean data, and that should be a public good. That's also important. So how we going to engage research in European transition? So I was starting by sustainable development goals. So that was agreed by all the partners and all members of the United Nations, and this is crucial for the sustainable future. And once again, I will be provocative with this SDG 16. This is very important for our sustainable future if we could reach these 17 SDGs. We need ocean science-based solution. This is what I was trying to show you during this talk. We need them, but they are needed fast. We want them to be in place as soon as possible. We need open innovation. We need to share our knowledge on best practice together, and this is important for the university. Working together at the European, it's important, and also at the international way, and collaboration. This is a word, collaboration, it's imperative, and we have to collaborate. Within the next decade is to provide, it's one of the one of the sustainable development goals, nutritious food, clean energy, water, medical services, and decent living condition for all the people on Earth. I'm smiling because we are very far from that, and in a sustainable way, and in taking care of our planet. So that's also one of the big problems. I know at the discussion at the Prime Minister level in France, there are few who believe that cannot be done in harvesting the ocean. And today, the ocean is under threat from pollution and climate change. So we have really to consider a sustainable way of going to take the resources of the oceans we need, but we need to protect the ocean as much as we can. So, as recommended by the European Marine Board in our publication of Navigating the Future, Europe has to play a role to reach the future we want. Europe Marine Research for her healthy oceans and sustainable use of its resources is a step toward the science we need for the ocean we want. So I recommend you to probably have access to all our publication. It's a lot of to read. You have some publication. I like the comment from Olivier just before. He told me, are your publication useful? Yeah, they are going to a draw or a cupboard. You give them, and the guys say, "Oh, nice," and they put it in the cupboard. I hope no, we have made impact, and I'll see how they have been quoted and used. I can tell you, at least at the European Commission, they are very used, and some of our recommendations are taking completely into action during the project and the calls they are launching. So thank you very much. I'm ready for questions, and I'll let you see a little bit of our nice planet before it disappears.
Any questions? Yes. Well, my name is Fidel Echevarria. I am a professor in the University of Cádiz on marine ecology, and also I am the general coordinator of this Alliance CEU. So it has been really a very interesting talk, and we are also very committed with these topics. And indeed, within our alliance, as a couple of examples of activities that I think has a close relationship with the items you have told. One of them is that we are working in a joint program, in a joint bachelor program, which we call Sustainable Blue Economy, trying to give an interdisciplinary view with the concept of circular economy and the possibilities of the ocean and sustainable use of the ocean. So this is one of our contributions in this aspect, and the other one is we are launching an observatory also on blue economy. So I think that these are two initiatives that are complementing and that could be useful in terms of these sustainable development goals that you have told us. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your remark. And I think you were talking about this partnership, which can be launched, Sustainable Blue Economy Partnership, which is also very important, and that the way that Europe, with the member states and Spain, I know the University of Cádiz, they are a good geologist also. I've been working with them. And no, yeah, it's very important that but I think CZU has something to important role to play, like the European Mind Board, because the university has the capacity building leadership. So we need the university to bring the next scientist generation and achieve the goals the best we can.
Christine Payard, chercheuse en biologie au CNRS et vice-présidente culture, sciences et arts à l'université de Brest. Thank you very much for your conference. I have a question related to how it is articulated between the European Marine Board and the other country is there also an organization in the United States or also in Asia, and how you can communicate, because it is a global question, so how we can impact in Europe but also in the world?
Thank you very much for these questions. There are, if we take the example of USA, the United States of America, which is a federation, so there are different also university and group. They have a grouping which is called Ocean Leadership, and we have been working together to try to have position paper for the United Nations, especially. So we have connection with them. We have also a connection with Canada, with Ocean Network. And we work also with POGO, which is it's also an association, which is a partnership for observation of the global ocean, and it's an international partnership. And they are working to try to enter one of the IOC, Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of the UNESCO, which is in charge of the decade. And to bring the program GOOSE, which is a global ocean observation system, in place. Because the problem of UNESCO, they don't have any money. They send a lot of programs with big ideas, but after it's you and I who have to put it in place and try to find the money to do that. So That's one of the problems, and the universities. That's a good question. There is a position paper about that. So I'm not gonna make a summarize of it, but it's there is the impact of ocean and human health. So it's also something important. And there's many. I was talking. I think I was a little bit pessimistic. Probably I've noticed that in my talk. Is the age. I'm getting old, and I had the feeling that I've been rowing, saying the same thing to the politician that the climate is changing, and they say no, there is a lot of snow. Now I'm not talking about the forecast. I'm talking about the climate. So, and it was very difficult. So the positive thing is that we had in the oceans a lot of unknown realm and unknown things. And I will take the example of Ifremer, for instance. I've been working for Ifremer for more than 30 years. So every time they dive in the deep oceans, they bring new species that they have never described. And in 1981, so when I was a student, my professor of biology was telling us that the energy and the life is depending on the energy of the sun. Nothing can live without the energy of the sun. And just enter Ifremer, Nexo at that time, and the guy dove, and they found life in the black, in the deep, in the black, and no chlorophyll, and exactly the same phylogenese, phylum that we have. So go from worms, shrimps, crabs, exactly the same. And that was the big questions of the origin of life. And they are living in heterotrophy of the sulfur. They are living with the autotrophy of the sulfur. No need of the cycle of carbon. They have a cycle of the sulfur, and that makes the whole life, the life working. And we have to know a lot of that. And there's a lot of possibility for medicines and for the human health. So this is also something which is for the future very important. So we don't have to destroy that, because if we destroy that, we will lose a possibility and momentum for saving life in the future. I probably don't answer your questions, but I'll let you read.
Thank you, Gilles. I have one question about the, that the higher education landscape in Europe is changing slowly but deeply, I think, with the creation of the alliance like CEU. Do you think that we can imagine perhaps more formal relationship between the alliance and the European Marine Board as a consortium of European universities?
Yeah, that's a question you asked me just before, and you say you were going to ask me these questions, and I was a little bit embarrassed. So I tried to find an answer, but of course we have to work together. And you are a member of the European Marine Board in the consortium of national universities, and we have a lot of universities inside who are members of the European Marine Board. And I think this is something we have to look at, how we can make a collaboration with CEUs, collaborative position paper, for instance, which is something we can do. We did that for the research vessels. We had a collaborative publication with the European Research Vessel Organization, ERVO. So, and we make the double. For EOS, we have been writing the position paper with Eurogoose, which is an association of people interested of ocean observations. So there is, of course, a multiple landscape, but it's important to have alliance. And I agree with you. And I have to probably I will ask the next General Assembly is end of October, and I will ask the questions about that possibility. But every university can make a consortium at the national level, like France, and get become member of the European line. It's also a possibility. But I don't want to make advertising too much about this.
Thank you very much, Gilles. I think we can applaud you more.
Thank you to you.
I would like to repeat or to add that all this documentation, very rich and very unique at the interface between science and policy, but between science and citizens, are freely accessible on the website of the Marine Board, very easily. Okay, now we move to the second speaker, Olivier Ragnaud. Olivier is a biogeochemist by training, a researcher director at the CNRS, and a researcher at the European Institute for Marine Studies, you know, in Brest, a component of the University of Brest. Today, Olivier is developing his work on how to engage the society in the necessary changing of our way of living, way of eating, way of working, facing the climate change. It's interesting to change about the way we do research, the way we do it, and the type and objectives of research we do. Now, Olivier, I give you the microphone for this talk. Thank you very much, Olivier.
I don't know if we can switch the presentation. Oh, okay. Sorry, I need to change my glasses. Probably. Okay. So, yeah, sorry about that. Good afternoon to you, and thank you very much, Yves-Marie, and for the invitation to talk to you about the role of research in transition. I will give this talk from two different positions. So I'm the scientific director of a national research infrastructure called the Réseau des Zones Ateliers, and it's working on social ecological systems and trying to see how research can accompany the transformation on territories towards more sustainability. And I'm also talking as coordinator of a national experiment, and I will put more emphasis during the talk on this one, about how research activities could diminish their carbon footprint so as to become more sustainable. What I would like to show you here is that when we talk about the role of research in the transition, and I would rather talk about transformation rather than transition, I think first we have to talk about the transition in the research system. And when I say research and training activities, because both are very much interrelated. Sometimes I would maybe only say research, but please hear also the impact on training activities. Okay, I would like to start from this mission statement, the CEU mission statement, and the first one in bold, which is very strong, I think, critical, is an accelerated shift to economies that thrive within natural limits, in which human and ecological well-being is prioritized over GDP. I think this is a very strong statement that is made by the CEU, and at the same time, in the same document, you see one of the missions of the Alliance is to offer research-based education and make the knowledge triangle a reality. And when you talk about the knowledge triangle, and I'm giving you an image here, it's a combination of research, mostly disciplinary, education, mostly seen as a transmission, and then innovation, which is mostly technological innovation. And to me, this is, I think, a weak version of the sustainability, is a kind of adaptation to the globalization and to, because you produce knowledge, and then knowledge is for economic growth, and development, and we all know that we are going into something that is, like to say, hitting the wall. So there is some kind of contradictions here, and we are going to see if we can manage this and, for example, answer this question: what would a high sustainability knowledge triangle look like? And that's what I would like to say to you during this talk. So I'm starting here with these images of climate change, the collapse of biodiversity, but also the rise in inequalities in many places around the planet, the rise of populism everywhere. And we have here a guy in France called Roland Gori. He wrote a book, and he was saying there that something is happening, something that we really want to avoid, and that calls for a crucial and urgent need to undertake a new great transformation, right? And of course, for us scientists, we are asking the question, what is the role of science in this great transformation? And I would like to show you these two anamorphoses. On the right, you have this CO2 emission. You know, the map, the size of the countries is made proportional to CO2 emissions, right? And you can see here this big divide between the north and the south. So these are historical cumulative CO2 emissions, right? And you have this well-known giant injustice in terms of climate regarding the contribution of the north and the impact of climate change mostly on the south. And Gilles was saying there will be no peace and if there is no justice, and I think that as long as we have this map, we're in big trouble. And what you see to the left hand side here is the map of scientific publication. And so you see it's the same map. So this is a good example that relationship doesn't mean causality, and science is not responsible for climate change. But of course, the intermediate here is the question of development. And so it raises the responsibility of science, because one cannot say that science is playing, and research and technological developments are playing a key role in development. And if we have to rethink our mode of development in the north regarding this plot on the right, then we have to rethink how we conduct science and what the objectives of science are. So in this philosophy, we wrote within this Labo 1.5 collective, we wrote 2 years ago a paper called On the Responsibility of Research in These Uncertain Times. And we are discussing two major aspects of this responsibility. Is what is the role of research in the transformation of territories to sustainability? And this is something that we are doing in this network of the Zone Atelier, where we try to have some interdisciplinary work, and we work with different kind of stakeholders to try to engage into transformation. And for us here, it's in fisheries, in agriculture, and so on. And then at the same time, we have a responsibility to embody this transformation and start by the research and training system itself. So this is the idea of mitigating the environmental impact of research activities. And we shall see that both, when you bring them together, they call for a deep reflection on the meaning of the research activity itself. So reconsidering not only the practices of research, but also the objectives of research and research projects, and the evaluation criteria, how we evaluate the research and possibly the training activities. So the idea here is to make the research and education system really a transformation demonstrator. So try to demonstrate that we can change our system, maybe produce better science and better training by emitting less CO2, and also having an impact by communicating this to society. So those problems on the upper left here, on territories, they are very interconnected. And they produce what we call wicked problems. And many people say that we have entered these post-normal times and that we need some post-normal science to address these wicked problems. So the wicked problems, they are those problems that are complex, they are systemic, they are urgent, uncertain, they are highly interconnected. They have no easy solution, and this is very important. Sometimes people come with easy solutions, and we know what it means. And sometimes the solution themselves, they may generate more problems. So to address these wicked problems, the science and the research is evolving. In the last 20 years, the research is becoming more and more interdisciplinary. So, as you were saying, natural sciences on one hand, but working more and more with human and social sciences, and this is very difficult. transdisciplinarity, and transdisciplinarity here is and has to be understood in the sense of co-research between academia and various kind of stakeholders on the territories. So the science is becoming more participative, more collaborative. It is solution-oriented, trying to help decision-making towards sustainability, and it is more and more linked to this decision-making. So there are, in the last 20 years, new fields which are emerging. For example, sustainability science or the Resilience Alliance. You all know the Stockholm Resilience Center, for example, is a great example in Europe about that. There is this Future Earth platform that was born like a decade ago, and there is this Belmont Forum, which is providing money to fund projects towards sustainability. And in these approaches, you have some keywords. We're working on social ecological systems, trying to understand how they work and what are their trajectories in the past and in the future. Keywords also how to address complexity. We have to develop systemic approaches to address this complexity. And there are other essential keywords here. They are essential if they have a real meaning, because sometimes, you know, these keywords in French, we say they become the mots valises, you know, they lose their meaning, like sustainable development. There's everywhere sustainable development, and even sustainability. Everybody is doing things which are sustainable. So, but these are very important words. I mean, learning, trust. When you work with stakeholders, you have to spend time with stakeholders. You have to be there, and you have to put yourself in a long-term position. So this long-term is very important. You have also to have a open, I don't know what's the English name for posture, open posture. I mean, being able to step aside, to get out from your comfort zone, because if you want to work with somebody from another discipline, another field, or even without outside academia, really it takes time, and you have to really have the will to do that. All this has very strong implications for the way we conduct research and we evaluate research. I'll come back on that. And for training of our young researchers, because that's not presently what we are mostly doing. Training is mostly still disciplinary in many places, and there is very little implication of stakeholders in many cases. Most important here, what is needed behind that is time. And I would like to come to this paper, which comes from the Stockholm Resilience Center by Pache and Osterblom. It was published as a commentary 3 years ago in One Earth, and it is talking about unsustainable science. So the research system, which is subject to many problems, just as in every human activity sector. So hyper-rationalization, bureaucracy and governance by numbers, marchandization, a strong focus on technology and technoscience, and most importantly, this acceleration. So acceleration, you know, is Gilles was showing. We all heard about the great acceleration after World War II. It is a major cause of many of the problems we have. And acceleration is seen in every human activity. And the sociologist, the German sociologist Helmut Rosa, has described this acceleration and the social driver and the cultural drivers of acceleration. The social driver is competition. And it brings to a more limited reflection and ability to engage with complexity. So this means that for them, we really need to develop new metrics that will increase the community resilience, increase the individual well-being, and try to stimulate creativity. And for the moment, science is not doing that. And if you read their sentence, I think it's very important. They say that reaching a more sustainable Earth relies upon the scientific community to generate critical insights and solutions. But we fear that this will not happen to the extent or in the time needed unless science itself becomes more sustainable. And this is very important because this means that we have probably, if you want to fight against acceleration, we have to get out from competition. And we all know that even our president of our CNRS has written in newspapers earlier this year that we have to admit that science is a competitive process. If we continue as a competitive process, we'll not be able to solve the problems we have. And then the cultural driver is this quest for eternity and happiness and so on depends very much upon technological development. We were talking about artificial intelligence. Who decides that we want to go to artificial intelligence? And this is the kind of things we need to to discuss. So does this mean that we need to go for more slow science, some low tech? These are just points that I want to bring into discussion. There is another way by which science is not sustainable. So there is this idea of acceleration. So we lack time, we cannot explore these systemic approaches. And at the same time, there is this unsustainability in our activities because we have a high environmental impact. You know, there have been a lot of papers about flying scientists who go across the world for PhD defense or a conference. And more in the recent years, very recent years, in the, let's say, the last 5 years, there are many individual and institutional initiatives trying to fight against this and try to reduce the CO2, the carbon footprint of research labs. So you have some examples of activities here, and on the right, I will not go through them, but you have more and more papers coming out. So this idea of measuring the carbon footprint of scientific activity is becoming a real research object today. So you can calculate the carbon footprint of a paper, of a conference, of a lab. I will come in 1 minute calculating the carbon footprint of a whole research system. Last paper at the bottom, very interesting. There are more and more people also in the field of social sciences studying the social determinants of the carbon footprint of labs. And they put a major emphasis on the idea of inequality, equity. There are some strong inequalities in labs regarding gender or regarding, for example, age or the professional status. In Switzerland, for example, they saw that professors emit like 10 times more CO2 than the PhD students of their lab. This is an example. What we did earlier this year within the CEU Alliance, we wrote a position paper. This is why I was asking Gilles before the talk, what is the fate of these papers? Did we write some that and it will be useful? So we wrote a position paper about reducing the carbon footprint of higher education institutions at the European scale. So in this position paper, we provide and we discuss arguments why we think research should reduce its carbon footprint, why we think it should not, because there are some good arguments and we have to discuss with the people who believe that we should not. And then we provide a CEU positioning, which of course is to explain, it's not only that we should, but also that we must do it for ethical reasons. And we can come back to that in the discussion. Then we provide the state of play for each partner in terms of carbon footprint and other environmental impacts, where each partner is presently staying. And then in the last section, we propose some, make some propositions, and then the partners commit at least to explore the possibility of using two tools that I'm going to present to you now. One of them is JEST 1.5, is a tool that aims at measuring with the same methodology the carbon footprint of a research lab. And then this experiment 1.5 I'm going to describe. So the idea is to engage the different partners of the university in that direction. So Labo 1.5 is a collective. It's born 3 years ago as a collective of several hundred researchers within 7 teams. It was born, so there was this paper in this article in the newspaper Le Monde in France. It came in 2019, and it's very important. It's 1 year after all those movements from the youth and the students. They were really pushy, and they pushed the researchers to ask themselves the question about their own practices in terms of CO2 emissions. So the collective was born with different teams, and for example, the team Footprint created this tool, JEST 1.5, which is a tool aiming at calculating the carbon footprint and building the greenhouse gas of your laboratory. So you can see on the left here, you have the perimeter of this calculation. So it's for the buildings, electricity, heating, for the purchases, equipment, for the computing, for the commute, and also for professional travels. So the idea with this tool is to contribute to this emerging scientific field. One thing which is very important is that when you calculate the budget, it involves all the staff members. We had, for example, our secretary being involved in the training of the students that we took to perform these calculations, and this was very important because there is a strong pedagogical component in this approach. Very important also is the sharing of the same methodology. So the idea is that all the labs who use just 1.5, they use the same methodology, so you can undertake comparisons. I'll show you in a minute. It promotes open access digital tools, and very importantly also, it accounts for the specificities of the research laboratories. And with this graph, I would like to illustrate this idea of specificities. So this slide is just showing after several hundreds budgets have been collected, right? It's only for buildings, so heating and electricity, and for the travels, commutes and professional travels, right? And it's the percentage, you can see like 25% almost for commutes, for heating, and about 35 or 40% for the professional travel. But this is not the most important, and this is very preliminary results. What is important here is the dispersion of the points, which shows that there will be very different situations depending upon the lab. Its geographical implantation, its size, its discipline, and so on. So, because of this very large heterogeneity, and because also of conflicting views and values, because this is very political behind, most probably top-down solutions might prove to be inefficient and generate additional bureaucracy. We must implement locally designed solutions. So the idea of this collective is that we do not wait for some constraint to come from above that will be inefficient in different labs, and we try to reappropriate this problematic in the labs and try to find our own solutions. So you have this tool, which will allow a unique analysis of the carbon footprint of a whole research system, for example, by emission category or by scientific domain or by size of the laboratory or the team. But we all know that there is a major gap between the fact that we know we have to change, even with the tool we know where we have to act, but there is a major gap between intention and action. And how do we stimulate the change in our practices? And this is why we undertook and we launched this experiment 1.5, like 2 years ago, which is an experiment at national scale in which we try to explore this transition from the will to change to some real changes practices in the laboratory. We want to explore, first to stimulate the transformation, then to explore the efficiency of different tools, and then to explore the individual or institutional levers or barriers against change in the labs. So to reduce this gap between intention and action, we will explore the relative efficiency or the complementarity of different tools. There can be some awareness-raising tools like serious games, conferences, storytelling or story writing. We propose different tools. Some more economic tools like carbon compensation or the implementation of a carbon tax or carbon quotas. And then we want to stimulate discussion in the labs. If we want to implement carbon quotas, do you want them to be distributed equally or depending on the needs of each researcher? But who decides about those needs? Do you want these quotas to be transferable for next year, exchangeable between people or between teams, and so on? We want to have the lab and the people in the lab increase their capacity and discuss collectively about these things. We want then to study the impact of changes in practices, not only on the greenhouse gas emissions of the lab, but also on the quality of research and on the quality of life in these labs. Because this is one positive aspect of climate change, that it forces us to rethink our modes of production, consumption. We hear that for our everyday life, and for research, really, we have to go deeply into the idea of looking at the impact. Are we able to emit less CO2 while producing better research? And then again, we will come back to this idea of modifying the evaluation criteria of research and talking about excellent. What is today an excellent research under these climatic constraints? And finally, we want to think about possible spillover effect, how to mobilize more in the experiment, more in the laboratories, and then how can we communicate so that we can try to have some spillover effect outside academia. So we are having now this interdisciplinary, really action research project. So for a lab entering the experiment, you start by measuring your greenhouse gas inventory. Then you organize discussions so as to choose a mitigation target, a trajectory to reach it, and then one of several of the tools that we are proposing. And we suggest to engage and to mobilize as many people as we can in the lab so that the decisions that will be taken, they engage everybody. and so they will be better accepted. Then the third step is to implement the tools to be explored, and then have this triennial survey, not only of those CO2 emissions, but also the quality of research and the quality of life at work. So we will document all the process, because there are many questions and scientific questions at each step of this process. And then we'll have also some environmental economics who may look at the relative efficiency of tax versus quotas, or law scientists who may be able to look at, for example, the acceptance of a certain degree of constraint in labs. We have some environmental psychologists also looking at the individual levers or barriers against the will to change, and so on. For the moment, in the last 2 years, we've been focusing on a support component, and this will be made available to all labs very soon. So we produced a kit 1.5 where we described all the tools that are proposed. Same thing for the facilitation of debates and for the construction of a collaborative platform to exchange experience. So we are now in a pilot phase with 23 labs, a wide diversity of disciplines, a wide diversity of size. So it's too early to give first observations, but just a couple of them, which are very interesting for our discussion here. First of them is that they all deploy a wide diversity of approaches, but there is one common feature. It's the importance of having the head of the lab strongly involved in the process. And this means that probably the institution behind have to be also deeply involved and to encourage this transformation. Two fears that we hear from the ground will bring us to the idea of changing the way we conduct research. The first one is, very often we hear, I don't have time. Most of the people, they will say yes, we propose this, they will say yes, they will follow, but they will not spend time engaging into the experiment, organizing meeting discussions about quotas, taxes, and so on. And then the second fear, which is strongly linked to this one, is that people feel for their research and their career. They're saying that, what if I reduce my emissions and others do not? And it's the same, if France, we are saying, okay, we are only 1% of global emissions, and if the Chinese, they don't do anything, or the Russians or the Americans, why should I do something? This is good. And this, for a researcher, of course, is linked to this idea of excellence, competition in a system. People are evaluated mostly on their papers, and if they spend time on that, they don't spend the time on the papers. So, of course, this last argument reflects the political dimension of time, which is very well described by this Ramon Rosa. And of course, it's through what I just said about priorities. And when you take the three together, it brings us back to the paper by Pache and Osterblom that I was mentioning earlier. We really need new evaluation criteria, so scientists can have time to think about their activities and maybe engage in such experiments or any other way to do that, because this is just one approach, and we would be very happy to see other approaches being developed in other places. So talking about the need for new metrics, these are just elements for discussion, right? They could include the sobriety of labs in terms of carbon trajectory. Could discuss the value of the carbon ton. Is it the same if you go for a PhD defense to the other part of the world, or if you go to work on climate adaptation in the south, for example, during 1 month? Quality of research, including environmental and social responsibility, talking more in terms of quality rather than quantity, for example, for the papers. Collaboration rather than competition. And I repeat, it is the social driver of acceleration, and it's a major problem. Creativity, and we heard about art and science during the previous intervention. Inter and transdisciplinarity, I talked about that for systemic approaches that need to be undertaken to understand how social ecological systems are working, and this have strong implications for the training of our students today. Quality of life at work, and we can talk in terms of time, rhythm, the equilibrium between individual and collective, and so on. Equity in labs is something also very important. Meaning, a lot of people engaging in Labo 1.5, what we could see is that in these times of acceleration, many of the researchers, they lose meaning. Just like in many public other activities, just the meaning. Why? What am I doing? Am I useful? And seeing people engaging in this kind of experiments, that they see they are not alone in their lab, and it's very, very important. And then there's probably much more in terms of solidarity, the perennisation of changing practices, spillover effects. So the idea here is just that, coming back to this GDP that was mentioned in the mission statement of the Alliance, you know that GDP, there are many propositions on the table to replace GDP by more global indicators that account not only for economic activity, but also for culture, for the environment, for social and territorial cohesion. We could have and think about developing global indicator for the research activity, which could be a combination of these and many others, and probably this has to be discussed collectively. So my last slide for Yves-Marie is to come back from, you know, this knowledge triangle. So the left side that I showed to you at the beginning of the talk, for what I consider a weak version of sustainability, would go to the right triangle. So you move from adaptation to, for me, from adaptation to transformation, meaning research is not only disciplinary, but also inter and transdisciplinary. Education is not only top-down, but is also, or had, or should be seen as an attention with the idea of care, very important. And then I left out innovation here. I replaced it by the participation. So science and society relationship, the participation of science in the life of the city, but also the participation of the city and citizens in the science process. So we are talking about collaboration, complexity, and also citizenship, which is very important. Again, for all of this, there are some very strong implications for training. Innovation is not gone. There is technological innovation, but it's everywhere. It's distributed in the triangle, and the innovation, to me, has to be also social, pedagogical, and also institutional. And we have, this is why probably we need you also, the presidents of the universities of the Alliance or of the research organisms, to help us to move towards this transformation and maybe go from this, what Eric Olling Wright in this book is calling, move from interstitial transformation to symbiotic transformation. So there's interstitial transformation, there are the ones arriving on the margins, they don't really change the system, and at some point you need some institutionalization so that you can change scale, both in time and in space. And I think this is really what we need today. So very important that the head of the labs, of the universities or research organisms get involved into this transformation. Thank you very much.
We have time for some questions. I think that it's very similar talk, many impact on you, but we need time.
My name is Hanna Solheim Hansen. I'm the president of Nord University, part of the CEU, or coming part of the CEU, one of the new members. This is more a reflection than it is what would you say, a question. And that is many times when we discuss green development with indigenous people, Sami people of our country, every time they say, well, it is good ideas and we think they're interesting, but every time we do any of these measures, it actually goes on, the cost is going to be the indigenous people's cost. And we as the white people will be will take the benefit of the measures. So it's kind of, it's just a thought that you are actually trying to describe a better system where we take also their needs and into consideration when we do tasks or new development in the process. But the indigenous people are very important in this concept too, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much. It's true that I was talking mostly from the Sea Alliance and then the northern view. And when we talk about working with stakeholders, this is the basic idea, is this idea of co-construction of knowledge. So it means that for us scientists, we have to admit also that the knowledge, we do not have the monopoly of knowledge, that there is some knowledge in different kind of practices. For us, for example, working in the Bay of Brest, the fishermen who have been going every day at sea in the Bay of Brest here, they know a lot about our Bay of Brest, and we have a lot to share with them. And so what we do in this network of Zone Atelier is try to have the wishes from the stakeholders coming up, and then see how the scientific expertise can be matched and how we can work together to construct the research questions and then involve them in the research process. But so this is very north, and of course there is, when we do that with countries in the south, then it becomes crucial, and there are also some ethical considerations. And there is all this idea also of decolonializing ecology and the approach. And what you are saying about this indigenous knowledge is very important. We saw that in Canada, or presently I'm working in Senegal with communities, and it's very, very important. And we have, again, to take a lot of time and to be present there to talk with them, to make sure that we don't do things that could be worse than if we do not come. So, thank you.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, do you think in the future should we treat unsustainable science at the same way that we treat unethical science today?
That we treat what?
Should we in the future treat unsustainable science the same way that we treat unethical science today?
I think that unethical science probably is part of unsustainable science somehow. For example, in the position paper, talking about ethics, there are some strong arguments. People who believe that we should not go in that direction, they talk about academic freedom, right? That nothing else but ethics should restrict the scientific activity. So ethics, in terms of experimentation with animals or stem cells or whatever. And I think that people do not consider for the moment the ethical dimension of climate change. And once you take into account the ethical dimension, and that's what we propose in the position paper, if you include the ethical dimension of climate change, when you look at the map, if you continue like this, I will not come back on the ethical of climate change, you all know about it. But then if you bring this in the ethical of science, then it makes, and this is why I said then, we must, it's not only that we should reduce our CO2 emissions, it's that we must do it for ethical considerations. So that was our answer in the position paper.
I think one question more, because we're taking much time.
The last one.
Thank you. I'm Fidel Echevarria from the coordination of CEU. And it has been a very inspiring talk, I think so. And I am living in a contradiction here as a coordinator of an alliance which has a plan of meetings every 6 months, in which we were 6 universities, and the European Commission was pushing us to increase to a number of 9. Now we have included the north of Norway, the south of Portugal, so we are very far from each other. For example, here in Brest, we have been for 3 days, and more or less 40 people has moved from their origin place, and in the best case, we have used 2 flights, but in some cases, even 3. So, in the other hand, from the European Commission also, we have a very ambitious goal of obtaining a number or a percentage of 50% mobility of our students in the next 4 years. So, it is very difficult to handle this reality with many of the observations you have very precisely given here. So, okay, the solution could be virtual meetings and things like this, but we are committed to go to a higher integration between our universities, and it was important to have a wide geographical distribution. It is quite difficult to avoid these travels and so on. So, which is your recommendation for us?
Oh my God. My recommendation is that you read the papers. No, no. I don't have a recommendation. My only recommendation would be that this comes on the table for discussions and collective discussions, because well, I had another slide where I was putting together different things or ideas that what we could do together. And one of them is think about the student mobility in such an alliance. Because I agree with you, on one hand, it's very important. I mean, if we are talking about peace and meet the other and so on, it's something really important. So we're not saying that we should not travel anymore. Fly is another thing. You could maybe take the train to come to Brest. But, well, this collective, for example, we are fighting for having the night trains to come back, you know, or different kind of measures that would facilitate the choice of the train versus the plane. You have to be motivated because, for example, to go from Brest to Marseille, it will cost you 50 euros by plane, 1 hour, and it will cost you 100 or 200 euros by train, and it will take the whole day. So you have to be motivated to make this choice. But this is something that has to change. And, you know, in terms of price and so on, and this is where I think that we collectively, in the collective 1.5 or in an alliance, we should try to make those things change so that people will be encouraged, for example, to take the train or other ways. I think the idea is really to find an equilibrium. You know, it's the same that virtual meetings are very nice because they will avoid and prevent from emitting a lot of CO2, but we cannot work on it by virtual. So we have to find an equilibrium, and I think most importantly is that this must be discussed collectively with the students and have their opinion on that. Maybe organize one-day discussions and some workshops, having the students and then the research staff discuss and see what comes out from that. I don't have an answer, but it has to be on the table. And it's in terms of priorities. This is what is discussed in the lab. Very important in these discussions, I think, is the choice of what we want to secure, because we decide it's very important for our activity and we want to keep it. But then if we want to have and to reach our objective, say, cut by 50% in the next 10 years our emissions, if we secure something, it means that the effort will have to be bigger on other things. And this has to be discussed collectively. And people maybe will say no. And that's what we are in the experiment interested in seeing.
Thank you, Olivier.
A very quick comment. I'm not going to support the airplane travel and something, but take care about the virtual meetings. There is a paper in Science where they consider the CO2 emissions, which is related to the use of all the computers and the data, which is in the data center. So there is all the problem everywhere. So
there are problems, but it's another order of magnitude. Really.
Okay. Thank you for the comments. You know, we are very lucky because Olivier and Gilles will stay with us for the visit and for the dinner. Don't hesitate to discuss with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Olivier. Thank you very much. Now, we let the floor to the Présidente Galou. Allez-y, vous êtes fort là-bas. Ouais, on va pas le laisser.
Well, thank you to both of you for this conference. It's a bit hard for me because, as you know, I'm a philosophy teacher, so I will have a lot of comments to do, but I talk as the president of UBO, so I won't say anything about any subject you wrote because it's very hard. And I don't want to take risks. No, I'm joking, of course. It's obvious it's a very important issues for all of us, I think, all rectors and presidents and so on. Well, just a few words to conclude, not only this time, but the 2 or 3 days period, the CU week in Brest. Well, first of all, of course, I would like to thank again Océanopolis, its teams, its management, and also the representative of Brest Métropole for welcoming us here today, tonight, in these wonderful conditions. Well, I'd like to be a bit optimistic, and not only to prove myself that I am younger than Gilles, but we have a lot to celebrate today, even if this kind of subjects are a bit tough. Not only, of course, the European idea we all share in CU, and also the emergence of research teams we will work on within our European University CU that are very important to us, but also the training of the future generation of citizens of our continent and the problems of the links between research and education about global warming and so on. Well, ecosystems involving many species live together in the tanks of Océanopolis, but not human in the tanks, but maybe it could be something we can invent someday. But we can imagine all the problems and the friction that exist inside the tanks between the species. But we can also see the solutions that nature and mankind have found in the past and will find in the future to enable this necessary cohabitation. We find here a true example of peaceful in the tanks and fruitful cohabitation and collaboration between species. And it's one that the CU Alliance seeks to follow in order to meet the challenges of today and tomorrow, of course, for mankind and other species. But we have examples in the tanks, I think. The conference that we have just attended outlined different ways, transitions or transformations on the scale of the continent and, of course, beyond is happening now. And I would like to thank, of course, Gilles and Olivier for their so interesting and so meaningful talks on these subjects, which we all know to be of crucial importance, and I think we are all here to think about these things. Of course, I would like to thank all the actors and partners of UBO who, by their presence this evening, are showing their interest and motivation for this project. We talked about participation between the scientists and the whole society. I think this event is a part of it. And this project, of course, that implies the whole continent from north to south and from east to west. I would also like to thank the member institutions of our University Alliance for visiting us for a few days in Brest, even by plane. It is an honor for UBO to welcome you. I already said it this morning, but I want to say it to all of you. I'd like to pay special tribute to the organizing team for their determination, their commitment to making our experience here, your experience, here, a good one. There's a good chance that the next time you will come to Brest, I will no longer be the president of UBO because my second and last mandate ends, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know, in April 2024. But I will certainly continue to act for CU in one way or another, and I hope that my successor, whoever he or she may be, there are too many men in the governing board, I think, it's a personal opinion, will invite me to participate and welcoming you all or your own next ones, of course, in the next meeting in Brest for the next governing board that we will organize here. I don't know the precise schedule. I think it's 25, 26, 25, yes. I will ask my minister if I can add 1 year to the mandate. Well, to end this speech, I would like to stress 3 words. The first word is the name of a country, of course. It's Ukraine. We didn't talk about this today, but obviously we cannot gather here men and women from many countries of Europe, especially today, after the speech of President Putin this morning, without saying a message of fraternity and strength to all the Ukrainian people, and especially to our future partner, the University of Odessa, all its academic and non-academic members, and all its students. The second word would be friendship. As you know, I'm suffering myself from a strong and quite painful disease since last summer, and it's really a great pleasure for me to have so many friends here these days, coming from all across Europe. I can't name all of them, and I realize it's only men in my list, but of course Fidel, Paco, Dragan, Alfred. Thank you very much for being here, and of course all of you and my next friends, if I can say so. I can't name all of you. Friendship in Europe is also what we are all fighting for in CEU. And I'm so happy to see you here and grateful to all of you. And I hope I will be able to travel, maybe in train, to Cadiz next February to see you again. I think in train it's supposed that I will be away from UBO from 2 weeks. So I'll ask my my staff if I can do so, but I hope I will do so. The third and last word would be thank you. And a very special thank you to my Vice President for CE Affairs, Professor Yves-Marie Paulet. As many of you know, Yves-Marie spent the last 6.5 years in my team, showing that our common invention, there were no vice president for C in any French university before we chose it. And I believe it hasn't changed since in other universities. But this common invention was a really great idea, and I hope we have proved it for these 6 years. It would be far too long to tell you all the things Yves-Marie has done for UBO and for all the research and education matters in the sea and ocean issues, not only in UBO, of course, but also in France, in Europe, and all over the world. All the rectors that are present here tonight surely know that we have so many things to do every day, so many problems to deal with, that it's very hard to create new friendly links, even with the people with whom we work nearly every day. So now that Yves-Marie decided before his retirement to go back to his lab and to regain his special relationship with different kinds of shells, but you will ask him during dinner. I hope we'll find more time to chat together just as good friends and not as president and vice president anymore. So I would like to, that's all of us, stand up now, please. If I can do so, you can do so. And show to Yves-Marie all our acknowledgements for what he's done these years. Thank you, Marie, and good evening to all of you. Thank you. I promise you it wasn't a way to ask him to stay a bit longer. But well, Yermat, now, as we say in Breton. Céline, thank you very much, and I think you will tell all the people where we go now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. People who want to visit Océanopolis, you will have to go on the right. There are some guide, and you will visit the 3 pavilions, and other people you can wait and walk in the gardens around the pavilions, and after we will have a dinner in the tropical pavilion. Okay? Is it okay for everybody? You will find some people on your right. Thank you.